3 weeks. That is all that stands between this team and the regular season opener in Kansas City, and if today's practice session is any indication, this roster could not be trending in a better direction heading into it. We are talking a complete injury scare resolved. A franchise quarterback slinging the football with more zip than fans have ever seen from him. A coaching staff dropping a genuinely fascinating explanation for one of the most confusing plays of the preseason. And a division rival watching helplessly as another AFC team got taken to the cleaners in a trade that should have this entire fan base celebrating. There is a lot to get through here, so let's dive right in. Before we break down every single piece of this, if you love getting the full story behind what is actually happening at practice instead of just the headlines, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It costs nothing, it takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps this channel keep bringing you this level of daily coverage. All right, let's get into the good stuff, because there is a ton of it today. Let's start with the story that had every single fan holding their breath over the last several days: the health of Riley Moss. When he went down, the worry spiraled fast, and for good reason. There is recent precedent around the league of defensive backs missing serious chunks of a season after suffering broken ribs, with some cases stretching to 8 games or more when complications arise, including the genuinely frightening possibility of a rib injury affecting the lungs. That was the worst-case scenario every fan was quietly bracing for. But before practice even kicked off today, word started circulating that after digging into the situation, there were 0 real injury concerns, and no expectation that Riley Moss would be missing any real time at all. The coaching staff doubled down on that same message from the podium, explaining that the approach with him right now is purely about caution, nothing more. He was already out on the side field today, which, for anyone who does not know the process, is essentially the final checkpoint before a player returns to full team practice. 0 red flags, just a team being smart and careful with one of its best defensive playmakers. And here is where the story gets genuinely entertaining. Word got out across social media that fans of a certain NFC rival have started photoshopping Riley Moss into their own team's colors, practically begging their front office to go make a trade for him after watching him absolutely erase one of their top receivers on the field, including a gorgeous undercut on a pass that could have easily gone the other way for an interception had he chosen to intercept it instead of simply knocking it down. Look, there is 0 universe where that trade actually happens, and it should not happen. But there is something deeply satisfying about watching an entire rival fan base clamor for a player, because they got a first-hand look at exactly how dominant he can be. This secondary is already regarded as one of the very best units in all of football, and the kind of quality depth this roster showed off in Riley Moss's absence. With multiple young defensive backs stepping directly into that spotlight and performing well, is proof that this team built the position correctly. Injuries like this are exactly why you invest in quality depth. They are not a reason to consider moving on from your best player. There is one small note of caution worth mentioning here, though. This franchise does have a bit of a recent history of shipping players out during moments when those same players were sidelined with injuries, so until Riley Moss is fully back out there running around at full team practice, there will be a little bit of lingering unease among fans anytime his name gets connected to trade buzz, even buzz that originated from a rival fan base joking around online. That is not a real concern about him missing week 1. It is simply a reminder that until he is back on the field for good, it is worth keeping an eye on the situation just to be safe. Now let's talk about arguably the best piece of news to come out of today's session, and that is the way Bo Nix looked in his first practice back after making his first live start in roughly 7 months. There were legitimate questions heading in about how his body and his rhythm would respond after finally getting hit again in a real football setting for the first time in that long a stretch. Every single update coming out of practice paints the same picture. He looked fantastic, he was slinging the football with real confidence, and there was no visible sign of him favoring anything or playing tentative in any way. What might be the most exciting development of all is something that has been trending across his throws all preseason long. The ball is coming out of his hand with noticeably more velocity and trajectory than in years past. This is not simply a quarterback who looks the same as he did a season ago. This appears to be a quarterback who has genuinely taken another step forward as a passer, and seeing that trend continue into a full team practice after his first live start back is about as encouraging a sign as this coaching staff could possibly ask for heading into the stretch run of preseason. Now let's talk about the moment from this past week that had every single fan scratching their heads. That walk-in touchdown allowed on a back-breaking Green Bay drive that seemed to catch the entire defense flat-footed and out of position. The explanation finally came straight from the top today, and it lines up with what a lot of sharp-eyed fans had already suspected while re-watching that play. The belief is that the linebacker responsible for making defensive checks attempted to audible into a different call, but with a rookie cornerback filling in for the injured Riley Moss, that communication simply did not get relayed correctly across the rest of the defense. In other words, the linebacker was actually doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing, reading the situation and adjusting on the fly, but the rest of the unit never got the memo in time. The head coach even offered up a pretty colorful way of putting it, essentially saying the linebacker was operating on an advanced level of the playbook while some of his teammates were still working through the fundamentals. And that miscommunication is exactly the kind of teaching moment you would rather have happen in a meaningless preseason game than in a real one that actually counts. That distinction matters enormously. Nobody enjoys watching their team get run over by 20 points in any setting, preseason or otherwise. But if the actual root cause of that specific breakdown is simply a rookie replacement not yet being fully in sync with a veteran linebacker's checks, rather than some deeper scheme issue or a lack of football IQ from the players involved, that is an enormously fixable problem, and one that gets corrected with more communication, more reps, and more film study. Far better to learn that lesson now, in August, than to watch that same exact miscommunication happen again in a game that actually matters. There is a mountain of roster speculation swirling right now as well, with a very tight turnaround left before this roster needs to get trimmed all the way down from its current size to the final 53. There is a strong case to be made for wanting to see the starting offense get at least a couple of live drives in the final preseason tune-up, especially against a defense that plays with real physicality and does not treat the moment like a throwaway exhibition. But there is an equally strong case that the players still genuinely fighting for their roster futures deserve every single available snap they can get their hands on before final cuts arrive. That decision reportedly will not get finalized and announced publicly until later in the week, so for now, it remains one of the more fascinating storylines to watch play out. One other juicy nugget worth mentioning, there is reportedly some level of coordination happening behind the scenes between the two coaching staffs preparing for this final preseason matchup, essentially agreeing to give each other the specific offensive and defensive looks each team wants to evaluate. So if the plan really is to get a look at the starting offense in a couple of possessions, do not be surprised if the opposing coaching staff obliges by matching that request with their own starting defensive personnel, giving both sides a genuinely useful final tune-up before the games start counting for real. Now let's shift over to a roster decision that raised plenty of eyebrows earlier this offseason: the move to bring in a talented young safety. There has been plenty of speculation about what that signing actually signals, whether it is a sign that a certain incumbent safety was not living up to expectations, or a signal that other young players at the position might be squeezed off the roster entirely. According to the head coach directly, the real explanation is much simpler than any of that speculation. This was about the rare opportunity of landing a talented, still young player with a championship pedigree, someone who has already proven himself as a quality special teams contributor and who has been publicly praised as one of the better prospects to come out of his draft class by a well-respected offensive mind around the league. In other words, this was not a move born out of desperation or dissatisfaction with the current safety room. It was simply too good of an opportunity to pass up when the player became available. That framing should genuinely ease some of the tension fans have been feeling about how crowded that position group has suddenly become. Now here's a piece of news that might be the single most encouraging development of the entire session. Marvin Mims is officially back in action. Not only was he spotted taking part in individual drills, he was also fully involved in team period work, which is about as strong a signal as you can get that a return to game action is drawing near. There was even a highlight moment of him hauling in a touchdown from Bo Nix in the back of the end zone during team drills. Stack that alongside the return of the starting center to full participation as well, and this offense is quickly getting back to full strength at exactly the right time. Just stop and think about that for a second. This is an offense that already looked genuinely dangerous against a real Green Bay starting defense while missing its top vertical threat, without its top pass-catching running back, and while working behind its fourth different option at the center position. Imagine what this unit is capable of once every single one of those pieces is back in the fold together for the first time. There was one more name worth a quick mention on the injury report. A young second-year player who reportedly dominated during off-season minicamp sessions and voluntarily showed up to work with the rookies despite already being past that stage of his career, has finally been spotted back out at practice after missing time. It might be a tough climb for him to fully claw his way back into serious roster consideration this late in the process, but it is a name worth continuing to track as final cuts approach. Add it all together, and across the board, at nearly every single position on this roster, banged-up players are trending back toward full health at exactly the right moment. While it feels like the rest of the league is dealing with significant injury concerns heading into the final stretch of the preseason, even the head coach could not help but acknowledge from the podium just how fortunate this team has been on the health front so far. Now let's finish up with the story that should honestly put a smile on every single fan's face regardless of how this roster shakes out over the next few weeks. Because a division rival in New England just got fleeced in a trade that has their own fan base furious. New England shipped out a genuinely productive receiving weapon, a player who was on the field for nearly 60% of that offense's snaps a season ago, and who was reportedly a legitimate fan favorite in that locker room. In return, that same franchise received a receiver who has appeared in only a handful of career games with a single career start, along with a very late 7th-round draft selection. That is about as lopsided a trade as you will find anywhere in the league this offseason, and Patriots fans themselves have been the loudest voices calling it out online. Stack that departure on top of the loss of their top receiving option from a season ago, and this is now an offense that is going to look drastically different heading into the year, and not in a good way for them. And finally, in case anyone still needed the receipts, the league's own top 100 player rankings, voted on entirely by fellow players around the league, placed Denver's top cornerback at number 10 overall. That recognition, coming directly from the people who actually have to line up across from him, is about as strong a validation as you can possibly ask for. And in a fittingly ironic twist, it was none other than the very same Patriots offensive coordinator who once again publicly praised him as the best cornerback in the entire league, despite plenty of noise from Patriots fans insisting one of their own defenders deserves that title instead. When the coach responsible for scheming against him week to week is the one handing out that praise unprompted that tells you everything you need to know about how this player is truly viewed around the rest of the league. So there you have it, 3 straight pieces of genuinely fantastic news rolled into a single practice session, and just enough juicy roster intrigue sprinkled in to keep this final countdown to the regular season interesting. Riley Moss is fine. Bo Nix looks like he has taken yet another leap forward as a passer. And a division rival just watched a fellow AFC team get taken advantage of in a trade that should only make this Denver roster look even more dangerous by comparison heading into the year. Let me know down in the comments what you are most excited about out of everything we covered today. Whether it is Riley Moss shaking off that scare, Bo Nix slinging the ball with that new zip on it, or the Patriots getting fleeced in that trade. I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to hear where you stand. And if you made it all the way to the end of this breakdown, that tells me exactly the kind of dedicated fan this channel was built for, so before you head out, do me a favor. Like this video so more people get a chance to see it, drop your thoughts down in the comments, and if you have not already hit that subscribe button, please go ahead and do it. It genuinely helps this channel keep growing so we can keep bringing you the full story every single day leading up to kickoff. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, 3 weeks to Kansas City, and I could not be more excited. Until next time, I will see you in the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.